Hot press was very important for this reason, is that here I was, given my particular background, and I claimed that I was a competent lecturer, but I was lecturing to a very much a minority of the population. So I remember well Niall Stokes met me and he said, you know, Rolling Stone writes comments about politics and so forth. At this stage, hot press wasn't even gloss paper, not to speak but colour. So I got a bundle of Rolling Stones, spread them out on the bed, decided this is something I will do, and I wrote for hot press from 82 to 93, and I used it as a kind of an intellectual diary. I wrote about all the campaigns, the divorce campaigns, the campaign on family planning, all of these at home. But hot press was a great experience, but that was later on at night time when I would come back when I would be going home from the Dáil to my hotel or whatever. I'd meet youngsters in the street in Dublin, and they would in fact talk to me about Central America, or they talked to me about Africa, whatever, and it might have been a couple of issues away, you know. But I think I only missed about 6 issues. I wrote every fortnight. Niall gave me total freedom, as long as the piece was between 800 words, and if it went over 2,000, to give him notice that he needed more space. That was it.
Right, okay. You stopped writing for Hot Press in 93 when you became
I sometimes
minister
regret that. I was a fortnightly columnist for 82 to 93, but I became an occasional person after. I didn't write at all while I was 93 to 97. I had a rather conservative view, I suppose, about my duties as minister, but not that it was kind of risky or whatever. But after 97, I've written occasional articles.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I'll be free to write for the next few years, but...
what was your greatest achievement as minister, would you say?
I think the 2 great challenges I had were in relation to establishing TG Carr was one, because there were institutional forces against it, and I'm very pleased that I had said that I was going to do it, and I did. The other was Section 31 of the Broadcasting Act, and perhaps that was even more important because there was a political atmosphere around. I never believed that it was of any assistance at all in relation to public order. I saw it as censorship, and in fact I've written about that. Conor Cruise O'Brien had a different view to me. It's a very elegant argument that is in Mary Corcoran's book on censorship, in which you have Conor's view and you have my view. But I was those 2. There were others then that were very important to me, like, for example, I had been 10 years or 11 chairman of the Galway Mayo Regional Arts Groups, and I'd been involved with Sandy Fitzgerald in something called Creative Activity for Everyone. I knew people like Professor Kieran Benson, who'd written Arts and Access. That influenced everything I did in the arts. That report of 79 that spoke about community arts and access. And then I knew people like Lelia Doolan and Tiernan and so on. So in a way I was very lucky that I had an agenda in my head from day one about what I would do in relation to the cultural area. The other areas I had to start negotiating immediately for the drawdown of funds from Europe. And that's where the funding came for the purchase of Collins Barracks, which I did in the first 2 months, the movement of the Chester Beatty to Dublin Castle, the 14 theatres, Blanchardstown, these ones then all around, if you like, the Longford, Mullingar, Letterkenny, Galway, all of these. And they were all part of a strategy to create access. But it was, if I had waited to start constructing a policy after my appointment, I would have lost time. I think I had an advantage in both to whom I was married, that had brought me into the artistic community, Sabina Coyne, and then also the experience I'd had practically through the local authorities of having been chairman of a regional arts group that had pioneered an awful lot of things like murals in schools and so forth. And then the other side of it was I did have an advantage at having lectured on how decisions are made as a political scientist.
You're also a sports fan and chairman of Galway United.
Well, I'd say that, for example, those experiences I've had are ones as well that I should say will be of great value to me in the presidency.
Sure.
I've been a supporter of Galway United since it was Galway Rovers. when I came to Galway first and going down towards soccer in what was then called the Swamp in Galway, I was a supporter of Galway Rovers. I think I might have been vice president of it at some stage. But I continued on I've been a supporter of Galway United. I was at one stage a director, but I'm now the honorary president of the club. I remain that.
Right, okay. You're 70 years of age.
Yes.
Is that an issue? I mean, it's a busy job, the presidency.
Well, I have had a long list of people put to me as people who are achieved many things after the age of 70. I was asked this question at the beginning of the campaign, but it seems to have faded away. My energies are. I have the energy I've had the energy to run an internal campaign and win within the Labour Party for 9 months. From 19th of June, when I got the nomination, to now, I've travelled 16,000 kilometres. I have no difficulty in terms of energy or capacity. But you know, I did say to people when I was asked, they say that Picasso did his best work between the ages of 72 and 90. I have been attending international matches at which I have been very much in admiration of Signor Trapattoni's energy on the sideline, and he's a few years older than me. So I feel quite confident that I will be able to do a very good job.
Okay. Were you personally affected by the recession?
What I think about the recession is that I have great sympathy for people who've tried to keep their businesses afloat. I know they're in incredible times. I know, for example, because I have been all around the country twice now at least, I know owners of business who have kept the door open and turn on the light in their shops, even after they have to let all the staff go. And I am appalled at the way that they have been treated by the financial institutions in this country. I do feel, as I felt as well, in every part of the country, that the anger that is there is against the perceived impunity with which people who had duties of care and due diligence and so on, and who didn't exercise them, seem in fact not to have been asked to carry any consequences for their action. But you have to move on. What the country has now to do, it has to move past this point of justifiable anger and recrimination. And I see evidence of this everywhere. I think that when I go to something like Bloom, or I go to the National Ploughing Championship, and you see that all of the things that people are doing that are actually parts of the real economy, and a creative, innovative economy. As well as that, the other thing which I think has showed up in London, where I've just been visiting the Irish in London, or indeed in rural communities, is the strength of what I call the old decencies in Ireland. I think it is important that I say that in this contest, there will be those who suggest that all you need do is repair the model. I powerfully reject that. I think that where we have been for the last 10 or 15 years in terms of assumptions and values needs to be regarded for what it was. It was the expression of a radical, selfish individualism that assumed that you should value people in terms of what they owned or purported to own, rather than their personal dignity. So I have offered instead of that a radical inclusive citizenship, and the bedrock of that must be, after a lifetime in human rights, I stress the word dignity, irrespective of capacity or orientation or means. As well as that, the good thing in the country is the evidence for people being creative. They're doing new things, exciting things. They're combining skills with each other to create new opportunities. They're sharp people. They're also, I think, managing to create opportunities. That's very exciting and can be built on. And I'm talking about not a creativity only in the arts, but creative in the way you think. People are like that. And then finally, the other point I think that I keep stressing is that Irishness is something that belongs to the Irish who have gone abroad as well as to the Irish at home. And I think that we are heading now to a set of very interesting commemorative years. the foundation of the Labour Party, of which I'm president. That will happen in 2012. 2013, the lockout, which really is the circumstances of Tenements, Dublin. And then 2014, the start of the Great War, where tens of thousands of Irish died. And then you have 2016, where we made an affirmation in relation to the proclamation. And then we'll have come on to what was succeeded by the democratic programme of the first Dáil. I've said in my final speech in the Dáil, which is the speech that I've given in 25 years that is most used by young people, when they access that speech and they talk to me about it, they talk about what I had in mind about restoring the prospect of building a real republic. If you say you are in favour of a republic, it's not about territory. It's about the rights that you see in the other person, and a belief and commitment that your own welfare is accomplished in interdependency with other people in the public space. So even however it all goes, this is a discourse that I believe is essential and necessary if we're to get to a new place. So I'm not talking about repairing the thing that has gone down. I'm talking about taking the steps to get to a new place. And people ask me sometimes to give details. And I have given details about, for example,
Mary McAleese has been a good president.
I think she has been very valuable in making sure that we didn't lose the momentum of interest in relation to peace in Northern Ireland. And I think no doubt whatever is that in the public mind, and when you talk about her presidency, people mention the success of the Queen's visit. And that was interesting because you had a view early on, will it go off safely? But by the time you came to Cork, and the people were out in the streets, people were quite celebratory. I have to say as well, where I've just come back from London, that the media in Britain have been, even those who wouldn't be very pro-Irish, the Telegraph and the Daily Mail and others, have been all complimentary about the experience. The international media, it has been very valuable. It has been, so I think that is one. I think Mary Robinson, her predecessor, was very important, took a very important step in extending the scope of the presidency. The presidency has the constitutional obligation. You have ceremonial duties that you do with dignity, not representing yourself but the country. And then the third space is where you use your discretion. What topics do you take up? To whom do you speak and how do you do it? Mary did that, Mary Robinson did that very much in relation to homelessness, shelter and inclusion by talking to the Simon community. In my own case, I've said that I will be supportive of the convention on the Constitution. But I've also said that I intend to run a series of presidential seminars that are wider than the topics of the day and longer, maybe in time. I probably will start with the very first one of being young in Ireland, that will include everything from youth immigration to youth suicide. I'm interested in, for example, the future of Europe. Very much, is it to be the Delors vision or is it to be an adjustment of competing nationalisms? I'm interested as well as that in the whole issue of work and life, and the balance is there. And I think that these will be very useful in keeping, as it were, the themes going. But then other precedents in the history of the presidency, I think that, Paddy Hillary came into the presidency in circumstances that he mightn't have chosen, but he brought to it a great record as an Irish Commissioner for Human Rights, the rights of migrants in Europe. He did more than any other commissioner to establish the rights of out of union workers in Europe.
Person, when was the last time you cried?
Oh, I am. I can't remember. I think that there are times when some memories are very painful for me. I think I was recently I was asked to contribute to a documentary on Somalia after 20 years, and it was very difficult for me to recall the moment when the child died in my arms. And I think as well, when I go back to other aspects of my own past, when I think, for example, of what my father went through. You see, this is the point as well. I remember in 1946, I'm 5, but I remember a few years after that, an aunt dying who also lived with us in this small 3-roomed house, 1 kitchen, 2 bedrooms, whatever. But my father used to visit us. He would get the bus from Limerick to Newmarket and Ferguson. He'd walk the 1.5 miles. And he'd have things to give us, but there were times when he had nothing to give us. And I remember in my poem, my father married my mother in Mount Mellery in 1937. I recall him taking a badge from his lapel and giving it to me because that was really all he had. So there are moments which, quite frankly, I would be inauthentic if I didn't recall them with some. There are other dear friends of mine who have, there are people who were with me abroad, there is a human rights worker in El Salvador, Marianella, whom I knew well, and it's very hard for me to recall the circumstances of her terrible death. And then there are different people and so on. So those are, no, yes I am. I'm not an emotionally wasteful person. I've long gone past sentiment, but I'm in favour of passion. Okay. But I think you can control that too.
Do you believe in God?
I believe in, I'm in favour of belief systems. I think I discussed this recently with Mark Patrick Atherman. I hope I don't embarrass the Abbot of Glenstall, but I think he was with me in saying we need transcendental systems. It's interesting because there's a very new book just has come out from Yale University Press about it, The Diaries of Kedzim, and in that he describes going out into the desolate, bomb-destroyed London and realising the importance of finding yourself in the lives of others. Religion, for example, I think filled a gap for a very long time. And I think where it lost its ground was when it deteriorated into being a kind of moralism that didn't, in fact, deal with infinity anymore, didn't deal with how you reconcile the personal with the social, the finite with the infinite, but began talking about interpersonal control and becoming authoritarian and dogmatic. And really I don't have any time for authoritarianism or dogmatism in belief systems. But I do think that it is very important that people think beyond the isolated biographical life and think beyond the present time. Actually, that is what makes literature so spiritual. For example, can anyone say that Dostoevsky or Chekhov are not deeply religious writers and so on? So in that sense, yes, and that's enough for me. I think as well that I think it's very important to recognize that other people have different approaches to their beliefs, and you have to respect that. And I do. If a person gets great pleasure from singing a hymn, who am I but to hope that it's being sung well?
Right, okay. Finally, I saw you at Electric Picnic last weekend, so did you enjoy the festival?
I did. I had 2 great events. One was a Global Green, which was very interesting because the young man introducing me asked me about something we had done way back in 1992. Frank Stapleton, Leonie Rida and I had gone to Rio to make a documentary on, which was grandly titled 7 Days to Save the World. And it was at that conference that the term sustainability was first used, the Business Council for Sustainable Development. So effectively, there you had the business, international business sector realising that they better start talking in a particular way. Meanwhile, all the sea levels rose, and the people in the Pacific, they were in the Greenpeace boat. So he introduced me, he asked me to speak about what had happened between then and Copenhagen and now, and I did that, and they were wonderful. Electric Picnic was peopled by really intelligent people, and people of all ages, and it was